Since 1993, the northern Mexican border state of Chihuahua has been the site of a chilling series of murders, with estimates suggesting between 350 and 500 women and girls have been brutally killed. Most of these victims were found in or around the border town of Juarez. But before we jump into the story of Juarez, the serial killer's playground, if you love listening to true crime stories, you've come to the right place. Hit the like button if you enjoyed today's story and press subscribe so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Let's get into it. On Monday, February 17, 2003, Joaquin Lopez Jimenez was just wandering with a friend in the desert area northeast of Juarez. The two young men were walking their dogs and looking for empty bottles, cans, and other valuables they could sell for pocket money. The last thing they expected was to find a body. Even less, 3. The boys ran home to tell their parents, who subsequently notified the local police. The officers were skeptical at first and didn't put much effort into it. But when the detectives arrived at the scene at 2 p.m., all doubt vanished upon seeing the remains of the 3 women. The police quickly removed the bodies from the crime scene. They had just put the 3rd body in the ambulance and were ready to leave around 2:30 when one of the onlookers pointed out a 4th body, a little further away from the previous 3. These weren't the first bodies found in the desert area near the outskirts of the city. 2 other victims were discovered a little earlier, in October 2002. One of them was later identified as 16-year-old Gloria Rivas. Then, near Lomas de Poleo, 3 more bodies were found in January 2003. But the police and justice minister refused to confirm or deny any connection between the cases. The story got even stranger on Wednesday, February 19th, when the 3 bodies of the victims were identified. They were 17-year-old Juana Sandoval Reina, who disappeared on September 23, 2002, 16-year-old Esmeralda, last seen on January 8, 2003, and 18-year-old Violeta Alvarez Barrios, who disappeared on February 4th. Each of them had last been seen alive in the lower part of Juarez. When reporters asked about the 4th victim, police spokespersons abruptly ended the press conference and denied knowing about a 4th victim. This was nothing new to the locals, where a series of brutal murders had plagued the city and attracted global attention over the past decade. The number of bodies is a sensitive topic in Juarez, a bustling city on the border with El Paso. No 2 sources agree on the death toll of young women. El Paso Times claims there have been nearly 340 victims since 1993. Some cases have been solved, but some unknown experts believe that 90 or more could be the work of a serial killer. The police have imprisoned over a dozen suspects since 1995. With each new arrest, it was thought that the series of murders had been solved, but the number of bodies continued to grow. Many people, including some police officers, believe that the police themselves might be behind some of the murders. Recently, many think that the police are involved in an ongoing cover-up for the killer. A decade after the official rumors, one thing is certain: all women are in danger on the streets of Juarez. Most Americans outside of West Texas know Juarez only from fictional portrayals like the miniseries Kingpin. No one knows how many people live in Juarez. The Rand McNally Atlas published the figure of 789,522 residents in 1999, while media outlets from 2000 onwards suggest a figure closer to 2 million. Many are homeless, beggars living day to day, while others simply pass through to reach the border and the land of the USA. Money passes from top politicians, manufacturers, and narcos to everyone else. British writer Simon Whitechapel, in his 2000 book Crossing to Kill, describes the city as a painful wound from the friction of American plutocracy and Mexican poverty, from American desire and Mexican despair. Thousands of these workers are young women from nearby towns and villages. They go there hoping for the best, but usually get the worst. miserable working conditions and sexual harassment become everyday life in a city where life is cheap. Machismo is part of the problem. It places men before women, to the detriment of both. Spanish dictionaries define this as the behavior of a man who believes he is superior to women, ranging from daily arguments to ritual murders. Corruption also plays a role. Police officers earn so little that bribery is a common practice. Any crime can be covered up for money. Still, it is evident that there is something else in Juarez. Otherwise, every border town from Tijuana to Matamoros would share Juarez's fate of assaulted and murdered women. The first officially recorded victim was Alma Farrell, a young woman found beaten, assaulted, and strangled in Juarez, Juarez County on January 23, 1993. She may not have been the first victim of 1993, as the number of local disappearances exceeded each year. But Chavira remains the first known victim of the predator, whom the media would later call the Juarez Ripper. And while no traces of dismemberment or slashing were found in Chavira's case, many of the victims had similar wounds on their chests. The police learned of another 16 female homicides by the end of the year, with the last victim found on December 15th. This case was solved along with 3 others, but dozens of cases remain unsolved to this day, and 5 of the victims remain unidentified. Out of every 12 victims, at least 4 had been assaulted. The causes of death were 4 strangulations, 4 stabbings, 1 beating, and 1 shooting. Excessive decomposition of the bodies prevented the determination of the manner in which the last 2 victims were killed. In 1994, the police had 8 unsolved murders of women in Juarez, with 3 others having suspects, but no arrests. 3 of the victims remain unidentified to this day, and the others were aged between 11 and 35. At least 4 were assaulted. Causes of death: 6 were strangled, 2 stabbed, 1 beaten to death, and 1 burned alive. Before this year of brutal homicides ended, state criminologist Oscar Maynez Grijalva warned the police in Juarez that some of their unsolved cases might be the work of a serial killer. In later interviews, Maynez says his warning was ignored. 1995 wasn't a good year either. At least 19 women were found deceased by mid-September. 8 of them remain unidentified, 1 solved case, and a possible perpetrator, who was not charged, in 2 other cases. At least 4 of the victims were assaulted, 6 of them were strangled, 1 stabbed, and 1 shot. 3 of the 4 victims found in September had something in common. Their right breast was cut off and bitten. It turned out that at least 1 serial killer was active in Juarez. In October, the police claimed to have solved the case. They had a suspect connected to one of the brutal murders in the city. Fortunately for them, the suspect was foreigner. Abdel Sharif was born in Egypt in 1947. At 10, he was assaulted by his father and other male relatives. He emigrated to the United States in 1970, first settling in New York, where he earned a reputation as an alcoholic. Long after that, acquaintances confirmed that he was interested in young girls. Fired from his job for theft in 1978, Sharif moved to New Hope, Pennsylvania. John Pascoe, a former friend, says that during a deer hunting trip, Sharif wounded a ram and then began torturing the dying animal. Pascoe also says that when there were girls in Sharif's life, they often disappeared. But the alleged victims were never found. Pascoe says their friendship ended in 1980, after finding random belongings of missing girls in Sharif's home and a mud-stained shovel on the porch. By 1981, Sharif had settled in Palm Beach, Florida. As a chemist and engineer, Sharif was hired by Sercoa Inc. His abilities were so impressive that the company created an entire department just for him. On May 2nd, he took a 23-year-old girl to his home, beat her, and assaulted her multiple times. His employers covered up the incident, as well as another one in August when he attacked a second woman in West Palm Beach. Sharif received probation for the first assault and 45 days in jail for the second. He was fired the following year. He moved to Gainesville and soon after got married. The subsequent divorce was due to his constant beatings of his wife. He posted an ad for a maid on March 17, 1983, and later beat and assaulted the 23-year-old woman who answered it. Convicted without even going to trial, Sharif escaped from Alakua jail in January 1984, but was soon recaptured. On January 31, 1984, he was sentenced to 12 years in prison for rape. Prosecutor Gordon Gorland promised reporters that the day Sharif was released, an escort would take him from the prison gates to a plane bound for Egypt. However, when Sharif was released in October 1989, he was not deported. He immediately moved to Midland, Texas, and started working at Benchmark Research and Technology. The U.S. Department of Energy awarded him, and he was photographed shaking hands with then State Senator Phil Gramm. Sharif was arrested again in 1991, this time for driving under the influence. After his arrest, information from Florida reached Border Patrol that he had escaped deportation. A series of hearings followed. 2 years later, no decision had been made when Sharif was once again found holding a woman captive. His lawyer proposed a deal to the government. If the latest charges were dropped, Sharif would voluntarily leave the States. In May 1994, he moved to Juarez as a worker in one of the factories. In October 1995, a young woman accused him of assaulting her in his home. She also said he threatened to kill her and dump her body in Lote Bravo, a desert area south of the city where several of the victims were found. Later, the charges were dropped. Later on, the police found out that Sharif had met with 17-year-old Elizabeth Castro Garcia, who was found deceased in August. Sharif was charged with this murder and finally convicted in a trial in May 1999. He received a 30-year sentence. Although the police identified Sharif as a serial killer, the conviction did not solve the mystery of the girls from Juarez. The murders continued, and things even got worse after his arrest. 1 month after Sharif's arrest, police learned that 520 people had disappeared over the past 11 months, most of them women. A different solution was needed, which came in the form of a strange conspiracy theory. Between Sharif's arrest and the first week of April 1996, at least 14 more women were found dead in Juarez. Their ages ranged from 10 to 30 years. The causes of death were 10 stabbed, 1 shot, and 1 strangled. At least 4 had injuries sustained after their deaths, and 1 victim, 15-year-old Adriana Torres, matched the MO of the other 3 victims of the serial killer. The ongoing murders contradicted official police reports that the wave of killings had stopped following Abdel Sharif's arrest. The local police were confused. They needed explanations for the murders that would not question their main suspect. Their wish came true when, on April 8, 1996, the body of 18-year-old Rosario Garcia Leals was discovered. Among those questioned for the latest case was Hector Olivares Villalba, a member of a local gang called Los Rebeldes, the Rebels. Olivares confessed to a murder on December 7, 1995. 6 of the rebels were involved, and he claimed their leader, Sergio Armendáriz Diaz, known as El Diablo, was also involved. Armed with Olivares' confessions, later deemed a product of police brutality, the police raided several nightclubs and arrested 300 people. They captured 9 more rebels, including Armendáriz, Juan Contreras Jurado, Carlos Hernandez Molina, Carlos Barrientos Vidales, Romel Queniqueros Garcia, Fernando Germes Aguirre, Luis Andrade, Jose Juarez Rosales, and Erica Fierro. The 9, along with Olivares, were charged with conspiring with Sharif to free him from prison by killing local women and making it appear as if the killer was still at large. The police claimed that some of the rebels had visited Sharif in prison and were paid for the crimes committed. Juan Contreras told the police that Armendáriz sent him to collect a package from Sharif in prison. The package contained $4,000 in cash. Later, Contreras claimed to have joined Armendáriz and the others in the murder and assault of a young woman known as Lucy. Contreras later retracted his statements, and the charges against Queniqueros, Fierro, Germes, Hernandez, and Olivares were dropped. The rest went to a pending trial, and El Diablo received a 6-year sentence for the assault of a 19-year-old prisoner in February 1998. The remaining rebels claimed they had been mistreated by the police. Some showed burn marks, which they said were the result of torture with cigars. Meanwhile, the authorities stood by their accusations that Sharif and the rebels, together, committed 17 murders. The coroner in Chihuahua went even further. He told reporters that Armendariz's bite marks matched those found on the breasts of at least 3 victims. But the Mexican court ruled in 1999 that the evidence was insufficient to convict Abdel Sharif of conspiracy along with the rebels' gang. Even before the court's decision, the police concluded that their evidence of conspiracy was insufficient. The murders did not stop with Sharif's arrest, nor with the rebels' circle. In fact, the number of murders continued to rise. The arrest of the rebels did not change anything in Juarez. The brutal murders continued, and the public accused the police of negligence. And even worse, at least 16 women fell victim to the killer between late April and November 1996. 8 of them remained unidentified. 5 were stabbed, 3 were shot, and 1 was found in a container with acid. In some cases, the advanced stage of decomposition made it impossible to determine the cause of death. The following year, there were 17 unsolved cases of women's murders, aged between 10 and 30 years, and 7 of them remain unidentified to this day. In cases where a cause of death could be determined, it was 5 stabbed, 3 strangled, 3 shot, and 2 beaten to death. Statistically, 1998 was the worst year for the city. Officially, the number of victims was 23 by December. 6 of them remained unrecognized. The murders were as before: stabbings, strangulation, gunshots, and burning. Rocio Barraza Gallegos was killed on September 21st in the parking lot of the police academy. She was strangled in the patrol car of one of the police officers responsible for investigating the murders. Authorities described the death of 20-year-old Rosalina Veloz Vasquez, found dead on January 25th, as similar to the other 20 murders in the city. As a result, the lengthy investigation carried out until 1998 became a matter of numbers. In May, according to media reports, over 100 women had been assaulted and murdered in Juarez. A month later, they raised the number to 117. In October 1998, the Associated Press established the official body count at 95, while the women's advocacy group Women for Juarez believed the more accurate number was between 130 and 150. In a report from 1998, the Mexican Human Rights Commission blamed the police. But politicians covered up the situation due to the upcoming elections. By the end of the year, the Associated Press, in a report released on December 9th, claimed that at least 17 bodies bore identical marks: the way their shoes were tied, where they were buried, how they were injured, and this led investigators to believe there was at least one serial killer at large. 76 of the other cases were similar enough to suggest that the killer had imitators. Between 2017 and 2019, Juarez had 39 femicide cases, with 25 new cases in 2023, a startling figure that marks a 12% rise compared to 2022. Many questions still remain. Is it a doing of a local? Or is it a traveler who only uses Juarez as his playground? Will the perpetrator ever be caught? Let me know what you think in the comments section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of Night Minds. Stay safe.